Here in the office of Shelton School District Superintendent Wyeth Jessee. No masks. How you doing?
Good, Jeff. How you doing this morning?
Good. It's good to see you. And for maybe some folks too, first time they see you without a mask since you started the job, I mean, in a sense.
Feels really phenomenal. Easier to communicate. It's already reaped its benefits just on more communication with stakeholders in the community and just easier to get through a conversation.
How's it been in the schools? Let's start from the lowest all the way to the high school. How's the adoption of this, and how have you guys talked about students or staff that chose to continue to wear masks if they like? How does that work?
Yeah, so we know that some families and students are going to want to continue to wear a mask, and so we support that effort here. We know that we've set the clear expectation that, if someone chooses to wear it, let's leave them alone. That's their own personal choice. Just like other people have a personal choice to not wear one. Seems like a high majority, whether that's elementary, middle, or high school, have chosen not to wear a mask, but we still have definitely some students and some staff still wearing masks out there.
Been about, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks or so since this came about. Have you noticed any increases in either COVID-related sicknesses or just the fact that, there's other sicknesses out there that we haven't necessarily been exposed to over the last 2 years?
Yeah, so we watch the data every day. I'm always looking at who's out. What's the staff numbers? Obviously, if staff are sick, that's really highly disruptive to our overall operations, just because we're limited on the number of substitute teachers we have. And we also know the research says, hey, we really want your classroom teacher to be here, and we want them to, obviously, our staff to be safe. So we look at those numbers every day, and then we also look at, we still do testing for staff and for students. And so if someone is suspected to be either exposed to it or have some of the symptoms, we have that. It has been absolutely quiet for months. We've been running on at least 2+ months where our students aren't testing positive. So there's not hardly any COVID sickness flowing through the school district as far as students. And that would be the same for our staff. We've done a really great job. I love nothing more than to see that we have so many staff here that all of our positions are filled. I love that. Those are really big celebrations for us, believe it or not.
And this kind of is getting you on track in a sense of being able to be the superintendent in, not 100% normal scenarios, but closer to what you had been accustomed to before you came here. I mean, you came here kind of right as everything's going.
Yeah. And it's been interesting. It's, even prior to COVID, there's a lot of things that we do in the area of education. We are really focused on instruction and safe and welcoming environments for students, doing community engagement. And then COVID hit. It was a lot of management, a lot of exhaustion because there's so much change and things that you're just focused on health and safety. That's where your focus has been and how you're just going to manage every little nuance. And now, as you're mentioning, Jeff, it's like the clouds are lifting, the sun is out. It's like I can meet people. I don't have a mask on. I've met a number of some students in the last couple of weeks and staff, and it's just like all of a sudden I know what their face looks like. Oh, you've met Mr. Jessee, for example. I don't know if I did or not. I'm like, well, we've met a couple times, but
Hold on.
You might not notice just because I'm not wearing a mask. So it's just totally different. And it's changed our focus so that we're now really doing a lot of stuff on instruction, really helping students with their learning.
Anything new coming down from the state in regards to teacher vaccination or support staff, mandatory things like that?
Yeah, so we're still waiting for the state to make a decision. Ultimately, the Washington State Department of Health, Labor and Industry, those two departments, along with, I'm sure, the governor's office, we're really waiting for those folks to make a decision on what is the vaccination requirements going to be or not, both for staff and students. And so we're hoping, or at least we hear out there, that there should be some information about that come here this month, later this month. And so we'll wait for that. But there will be a time, Jeff, that the Shelton School District's going to have to make a call on some of those moves because, especially for our staff, we're going to have to know to tell them, hey, here's the requirement for you or not
Sure.
coming up, and what kind of accommodations we can provide them or not, for the rest of this school year. And then there's always summer activities, and then next year. So just trying to get people prepared. We don't want to delay it any more than we have it. I'd love to just move on, honestly, but I also have to be respectful of state agencies, and that's their call.
Yeah.
But we would have to make some calls just because we're going to have to manage in through those situations.
And you're getting close now to kind of re-up time for folks as they look ahead to what their plans are for next school year.
Absolutely. Now is the time. It's the budgeting staffing season as we have here in K-12 education. And so, we're looking at our budgets. The state legislation just closed up this last month. What are those numbers looking like? How's our budget looking? It's going to be healthy for us, but it also is the staffing moves that come. What other positions are we adding? One of the really good things about that is social emotional learning is one of the areas that the state legislation provided additional funding. I'm very curious of what that looks like for us. And so how many more positions can we create, or where are people sliding? But there's always this whole cascading ripple effect. When you have a couple positions open and somebody decides to move to another surrounding school district, or they move out of state, those positions need to get filled. We're very much looking to fill them, and people need to know, hey, where am I going or not going? Again, we provided accommodations for folks who didn't get vaccinated. They're still employed with the Shelton School District. We provided around 50 employees with accommodations who were not, did not get vaccinated. So that's a lot of people. And we have to manage each and every one of those situations, Jeff, separately.
Sure.
Nobody's situation's exactly the same. It's just like what we do with students. Why isn't my kid getting that versus this? Well, kids have individual education plans underneath special education. Your kid's plan is not the same as theirs. The same thing applies for the staff. And so when we have a couple positions hanging out there, we need to place them, which kind of puts things on hold until other districts actually make moves to open up positions. And so those staff who want to go there, vaccinated or not, that's not right. the real main impetus to why we're waiting. But it is definitely ones that right now, today, as you asked, for us, we're ready, actually. We've moved up our budgeting season way earlier. We usually had hired and did this work over the summer. That's way too late. We should be in a position of knowing what our master schedule is. What courses are we offering? What do we have available for our staff that they know what they're teaching, especially at the secondary level, so they can prepare. And so we're in a great stance. Unfortunately, we're just kind of in this holding spot. Everybody wants to know what's going on, including for some of our staff who are not vaccinated, but are like, all right, what's the requirement? Where am I going? We would love to tell them too.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I'm hearing about in other school districts surrounding Mason County in particular is the conversations about equity and equitable learning and things like that. How is the Shelton School District looking at equity, and is that part of, I know you have been working on the strategic plan into moving forward, is that part of it, or what's the school district's thoughts on equity around learning?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. There's a lot of diversity here in the Shelton School District, and it's changed significantly over the last 7 years as far as our demographic makeup. We know that now a majority of our fourth grade students this school year don't identify as white. So it's changed a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
As I mentioned, we've doubled the number of students who qualify for English language learner services. We still have our students who identify as Native American, and multiracial has always been another category where students identify themselves. It's changed a lot over the last 10 years. So, there's a lot of things for us to recognize that, hey, to be equitable, we have to upfront know each of our students and their families. What's your background? What's the things going on for you individually for your family? What are some different trends we have going on here in the district to best serve them? And then we need to adapt that. So, when people talk about equity, I say, well, who are we serving? And so within our strategic plan, we did a tremendous amount of outreach. I've mentioned that before on some of your other broadcasts where, we went out, reached out, did a survey, 570 families. We had a number of Spanish-speaking families. I believe 60 families within that were Spanish-speaking because we had it translated. And then we've done focus groups. And then one of our focus groups was we have a English learner family group. I did interviews with some of our Native American students. And so it's been just great to gather that information that did inform ultimately our strategic plan. And the two things about that, Jeff, is one, we do have an equity statement embedded into the strategic plan. Our school board really wanted to have something that was, again, representative of our stance to recognize we got to serve each and every student who comes through the doors of our public schools. And so we have that in place. It's also really important, though, to say, all right, we make this pledge, but what are you doing about it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part where, for the Shelton School District, that we might differentiate ourselves from other school districts where it's going to be embedded in all of our actions. So we have 4 priority areas, and underneath the strategic plan, each of those areas have pieces of equity written into them. And I'll just give really brief examples. One of our priority areas, the first one is we want to have high quality literacy. Well, that's an easy equitable move where we're going to have hot books in every single elementary classroom and also in grades 5, 6. They're going to have classroom libraries, 400 to 500 new books. Think of the inequities that were going on in the district. If you walk through some of our classrooms, which I have, some don't even hardly have a classroom library. Other staff have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on their classroom libraries. Do you hear the inequity of like what you have access in that student's classroom versus somebody else's classroom? That's a move that we're going to right size. Safe and welcoming environments. Big things in there is making sure they have culture and linguistically welcoming environments. So we're going to change the signage. Like if you go into Evergreen, Evergreen has great signage around in their building and the pictures, the representative of students, especially Latina. And we want to make that in all of our schools. So that's a move for us. We also have in our investment into effective teachers and leaders underneath that priority area. We're looking at our hiring practices. Where's our diversity? Are we to be able to do outreach? So we're going to look at, we know we have a number of, especially more entry-level positions, classified positions, such as paraeducators in our buildings, also office staff, who, that's a great place for us to hire folks who are, again, representative of our student population. And then our last one is college and career ready. We know that we had some inequities, especially for our Native American students as far as just overall suspensions. Most of those happen in the 9th grade year. So we are redoing this summer a multi-day orientation co-led with students at our 3 high schools so that we can start welcoming students in, building relationships, setting expectations, helping kids get warm and welcomed and feeling connected, so that we can help get them in and feeling successful from day one, as opposed to, wow, you already got an F on your, a couple Fs on your first trimester. Kid doesn't know how to navigate the district or the school very well, doesn't have maybe that many relationships, including with adults. We know the research says that student's a lot less likely to engage. And we know when kids aren't engaged, behaviors come out. So it just feeds on itself. So we're really trying to address that on our last one. So you asked equity, you can hear that in our plan, and we're already taking action on that plan literally today.
When you have to reach out to the voting public in the school district, oftentimes that age demographic is a little older, and I'll just say kind of a majority perhaps of grandparent style voters in the district. And sometimes when people hear that word equity, they feel as if to be equitable, they're going to have to take away from some other group to bring the rest of the group up, as opposed to just bringing the other group up to a similar level. Do you know what I'm saying there? So instead of, well, if you're trying to be equitable, what are you taking away, or things like that? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think.
How do you explain that to the
I
voting
love that.
public?
It's exactly, how do I explain that to a voter? I say, for them, a lot of people get wrapped around that about where resources are going. For us, I actually think there's a total different way of looking at it. Slight paradigm shift, if you will allow me. If you think about that and I say, oh, okay, so we're going to take from this population and give to that population. That's not at all what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is we've heard loud and clear from our students, from our staff, our families, and the business community. They all said the same thing. Increase expectations. If I say increase expectations, well, that doesn't cost money. That's actually how you think about the work. Mm-hmm. If we put limitations on our students, which has been some of our challenges here in this district, then we're not going to get outcomes. So for us and how we're going to do it, and I'd say the taxpayer says, well, actually, we can operate with what we have if we're allowed to continue to operate within those pieces, that we passed, most certainly our levies for operations. That's key. And then they know whether that's their grandkid, their neighbor, probably a family member who works for the school district. Remember, we have 800 employees. Somebody's connected some way by at least 1 or 2 degrees. And so by investing in that, that keeps an investment here for our community, not asking for more, but actually just asking for you to continue to invest, which they have done so well here, so that we can actually just keep those expectations high, do things like classroom libraries, making sure that kids in high school have engaging curricula, that we're training them up for the trades that we have here, whether you want to be a welder or whether you're going out there and you want to do work in natural resources or work at the hospital. We have those things for them. And so everybody has an opportunity for it. We just got to keep broadening it so we keep those expectations high and we're not limiting those opportunities, because we have those. So let us keep moving on that. So again, my summary would be say, if you're a taxpayer, I'm not asking for more. I'm just asking for a continued investment.
The open enrollment period's going now through the 22nd of April here, as people are getting ready to look at their upcoming school year. We've talked about it a little on the air too. If you have to have your paperwork in and your vaccination records and everything that you would need to join into the Shelton School District, due in by the 22nd, and you can go to the school district's website for that. And then before you know it, it'll be summertime.
You skipped really fast. So yes, before you know it, it'll be summertime. We're having an open enrollment period right now, just so we know, again, where our students plan to go. If they want to also choose to elect to not go to their neighborhood school, again, that helps us with our master scheduling and knowing where staffing needs to be, as opposed to what has happened here even just this last summer when I was coming on, Jeff, where I was getting some calls from parents pretty upset. They thought their kid was going to go to another school. We're going to tell families right up front after the open enrollment period, late April, early May, hey, you got in or you didn't get in, or you're waitlisted. And let's be clear about waitlist. It may not come off. And so that keeps it separate than trying to work that again over the summer. So that feels good. And then summer, we have a lot of things going on. We have dances for our high school students.
What's going on with high school graduation? What are the thoughts on it?
Well, we're going to have
drive-through.
No drive-through this time. Did you know? Maybe people don't understand. Like, people might think the drive-through was like, oh wow, like that might have made it easier. It actually was harder and it was more expensive.
Yeah.
So
it was pretty.
We're at St. Martin's, back to St. Martin's where we've been before.
Yeah. Okay.
The reason we have that there is because they can actually accommodate it for one ceremony, as opposed to breaking it up, which gets to be very long because we're just obviously have very limited seating at the stadium. So that's where we're going to have it. It's going to be really exciting for them. Obviously, Choice and Cedar are also going to have their graduation, so it'll be fun to have those coming up in June. just feeling great to see students' faces and excitement and kids moving on. It's going to be magical.
That's, graduating and being at St. Martin's University and then that great field house there as graduation. I mean, that's that's what people have been doing for as long as I can remember. And so bringing that back is going to be real special to them. That's awesome.
Yep. A lot of generations come through. People getting back to seeing, as many, not having all those limitations, right? Yeah. That everybody, the whole family, grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles.
Everybody show up.
Again, the neighbor maybe even, come on over, show up and go to the graduation will be a special culminating moment for many of our students.
Shelton School District Superintendent Wyeth Jessee here talking about a whole host of things. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.